Hey guys, welcome back. Well, this is a video I did not intend to make and hadn't planned to make, but I woke up this morning to all of the data I collected last night, and as I looked through the cloud cam images in video form, I noticed something very odd, and it sent me on a thread pulling exercise, and I found out that I just narrowly avoided a disaster. So I thought I'd go ahead and make a video here just in case you're about to make the same mistake that I just did. Now, what the heck is a cloud cam? Well, it's just this bracket that I put onto the handle here. This is brackets intended for furniture repair, but it's a metal bracket with 1/4-inch slotted holes, so it's great for 1/4-20 screws or M6 screws. And I just bolted one onto the front of my Explore Scientific ED102 here and added my ASI 120 MC-S, the USB 3 camera, onto the front that I use for planetary imaging. But I went ahead and put on the all sky camera just to keep track of what the sky looks like around where my telescope is currently imaging, and thinking that this might be a good way to keep track of what clouds are doing, and if I see some anomaly in the guide log or some behavior in some of the photographs I take, I can go back to this video as a diagnostic source and just figure out what was going on. What was the telescope actually seeing at the time the anomaly happened? Now, I've been using Nina to control the imaging session, so Nina has total control of the camera, the imaging camera, the guide camera through PhD2, and it's talking to the mount. So all of that's being controlled by Nina, but I also start up ShotCut and just run it independently, tapping into this camera here and recording images at 1-minute intervals just to keep a record of what's going on. And I go ahead and record an image rather than a video so that I can have a timestamp on the image, and that way it makes it much easier to go back and find out what the sky looked like when and if I see an anomaly. And yeah, I saw an anomaly. Not the clouds this time, but instead one of my screw-ups. So I thought I'd take a moment here to show you how I set up my cloud cam video for the night. I start off with ShotCut, as I said, and acquire FITS images at 1-minute intervals. And then I use PIP, the planetary imaging preprocessor many of you are familiar with and use for your planetary image pre-processing, and that's what I've been using in the past. It's a great piece of software, also free, just like SharpCap is, and that's what I use to stitch the images that SharpCap leaves me into a quick video that I review and see if anything catches my eye, as it did this morning. And then, just because we're here and don't have anything else to do on a nice Saturday morning, I thought I'd go ahead and show you how to take this video that we're making and add some annotation to it, maybe a little music, and we'll just make a 1-minute documentary of my imaging session and the mistake that I made. Alright, let's go over to SharpCut and I'll show you how I set that up for an imaging session. Got SharpCut here. I'm not plugged into my ASI 120 MC. Instead, I'm plugged into my ASI 120 MM that doesn't work. Thank you very much, CWO. Anyway, I can pull up the camera here, the ASI 120 MM. Obviously, when I'm doing this for an imaging session, this says 120 MC, and I would pull that up. So now SharpCut is connected to the ASI 120 mm, as we see here. One of the things that I like to do in the video that I'm making at night is make sure this is set to mono 16 just for better tonal control. I go ahead and set this area here instead of a default, which might be the SIR file. I go ahead and set that to a FITS file. I want to save images because the images will be time stamped so that I can easily go back and correlate the image that I'm seeing that we're going to capture with the cloud cam with whatever anomaly might have occurred. And then you got to set the exposure. Now this will vary for you. I've been finding lately as I experiment with 6 seconds, 7 seconds, and so on, 5 seconds seems to work best with the 120 MC and my light polluted skies. So that's something you have to play with. And then we need to set the frame rate that we'll be doing, and I'm going to go ahead and set that to 1 image every minute. Obviously, you could do them more frequently. I'm trying to cut down on USB traffic on my poor mini PC that's also acquiring guiding data through the guide camera and the actual images through my ASI 1600, so I don't want to get too much USB traffic. And then I will come over to the capture and start a capture. And what you want to do here is in these, you have a single frame, unlimited frames, you could do that. I set to a time limit. And what I do is set this to a 9-hour time limit. So I just leave that set at 9 hours, and then I can stop it when I'm done. So then I would just start this. Once I get the mini PC up and running, I get the Ultimate Power Box started, and Nina is started up, and I get the camera cooling. But before I do anything else, I come over and initiate the data capture, and it starts capturing images, one every minute. And now I can go back to Nina and complete the setup process and attaching all the equipment, unpark the mount, and it will start tracking. But initially I will have one or two images here that have already been taken with the mount in the parked position before it starts its tracking motion. In the morning, when you're done taking the data, you can just come over here and press the stop capture button and close down the camera, and then you can close down ShotCut and you're done for the night. Now let's go over and take a look at all the files we got. So in the morning, you're going to have a series of files, and you'll notice it's very conveniently numbered here. We have the image number, so that's the first file, that's the first picture taken, and for me last night that was at 9:26 p.m. And then it just takes a picture every minute, of course, because that's what we told it to do, until finally in the morning we have the 496th picture by the time I turned off the camera and stopped the capture process and turned off the camera. It was at 5:46 a.m. the next morning. We have a total of 496 images, and now it's just a matter of combining these images into a video that we can then take a look at. So let's bring up Planetary Image Preprocessor, or PIP, and that's where we'll load these files into to get the video. This is the PIP interface, and all I'm going to do is just come over here and say Control A, select all of the files, and drag and drop them into this list, and we can pull that down, and now you can see just barely that the image is upside down. One of the first things you want to be careful of is to make sure these are in numerical order, and here they look like they're reversed. So I'm going to tap on the file name, and then that will number them all or list them all in the order that they were taken, all the way down from 1 to 496. Now we can step through these tabs here and adjust whatever settings we need in order to get the video that we ultimately want to see. So on the input side, this is a color camera, so I'm going to de-Bayer it. Now you may not know what the Bayer pattern actually is for the camera, so you'll have to do some testing, and this is what I had to do. So I can select the default version here, test the option, and it's a green sky, so I know that's not it. Come down to the next one, test the option, and we have a blue sky, so that must be it. Now we'll come over to processing options, and this is where we can flip the file, flip the image. So I can flip vertically. There's also an option to flip horizontally, but let's flip vertically and test the option. And yes, that is the way it should look. When you're standing behind the telescope, this large tree is just to the east of the telescope. For output options, one of the things that I do is to use the frame rate of the input video, but it's not a video. So I set this to something a little slower. After all, I don't want this thing to blitz by in a fraction of a second. I want this thing to last a little while, so 7 hours of imaging at 10 frames per second gives me about a 1 minute video for the whole imaging session. And I think that's a good enough set of minimal options to get us into a video. Now we come over to the Do Processing tab, and we just say Start the Processing. And it'll crank through these images pretty fast and place them in an AVI video that we can watch. And there's the video there. The size of this file is actually pretty large. In fact, if we come over here, we can see it's 1.7 gigabytes. Let's go ahead and play this and see what we can see. Now I'm watching this and everything looks fine. I'm over on SH286 here. And eventually it's going to cut out and go over to M16. And then something weird happens right there. What just happened there? If it did what I thought it was going to do, it would have done a meridian flip during the slew, and I'd be set. So it looks like it just went to M16 on the same side of the meridian, and then when it got to some point over here, it actually did a meridian flip when I wasn't actually expecting that to happen. Let's go back to the stellarium map to show you what it was I was expecting. So this is about the third day of this imaging session that I have been going on here. It's to capture SH286 and M16, the Eagle Nebula. And the whole idea is that I figured I would start off when it gets dark around 9:45 and just image SH286 until it gets to about 1:10 in the morning, because at 1:10 in the morning that's when M16 reaches the meridian. And then I would just slew over to M16, but making sure to get a meridian flip in the process, because I want to pick it up on the other side of the meridian and follow it down to the horizon. Now, of course, you could just do a slew from finishing up doing the imaging at SH286 and slew right over to M16, but the problem is you're likely going to be on the same side of the meridian, and now your counterweights will be moving up while your telescope is moving down. So instead of doing that, what I did was to program in a wide slew out well past the meridian to M5, a globular cluster. Went ahead and did a focus on the globular cluster while I was there and took a short picture as a postcard to say I've been there. And from there, I slewed over to M16, and now I'm on the same side of the meridian and can safely follow M16 down to the horizon without any issues. So that was the idea. That's what I did the first 2 imaging nights, and everything worked out fine. What I was noticing as I was getting some of the data, and these pictures here correspond to the first night's data, there's quite a bit of good signal in M16 on all 3 channels, the HA, the O3, the S2, a lot of good data coming in for that particular target. I only have about 3 hours on it, given that it's in such a southern position, and because my house blocks me to the south, by the time it passes the top of the roof of my house, there's only about 30 minutes in here before it gets to the meridian. And so rather than pick up M16 just to turn around and do a meridian flip, I instead pick up this particular target, in this case SH286, when it's dark, and I can follow it until M16 gets to the meridian. So I get about 3 hours on SH286 and about 3 hours on M16, and that was been my imaging process over the first 2 nights. But I was noticing that the SH286 is a lot fainter. There's very little data in oxygen and S2, so I wanted to spend a little more time collecting data on SH286, and knowing that I had plenty of signal in M16, I decided to steal an hour from M16 and hand that over to SH286. I start off again at 9:45 p.m. and follow SH286 up to 2 a.m. Instead of 1:10, I go to 2:10 a.m., so it's just before it gets to the meridian. And then rather than do a meridian flip on SH286 and pick it up on the other side, I just say, well, I'm going to go ahead and slew to M16, but my thinking was that M16 is now well past the meridian, so now I don't have any problem. I can just slew to M16, and that will automatically cause a meridian flip. Well, that was the mistake that I made. It wasn't far enough past, M16 was not far enough past the meridian, and so the very thing I was trying to avoid by taking that detour to M5 is exactly what was happening and what I saw in that video. Let's go over to ShotCut now and load in that video we just made in PIP and add some annotation and some overlay figures such as what we're imaging, and maybe even a musical score to go with it. And then I'll create a new video of that, and we'll put that up on YouTube as well as the video that you're watching right here. I'll put a link to that video in the description to this video if you just want to go over there and click on it and see what it looks like. Alright, so this is ShotCut. It's a free piece of software. It's a very powerful video editing. It's what I use to make all the YouTube videos. I don't do a lot of features with my YouTube videos, but it is capable of quite a bit more than what I'm having it do to make my YouTube videos. But I thought I would exercise a few things here just to play with it and introduce ShotCut to you, just in case you have the need for a cheap, i.e. $0, and yet very sophisticated video editing software for any of your activities. First thing we want to do is to set up a folder for our ShotCut video, and so I just picked the folder where I have all of those FITS files and where the PIP video is that we just created. So I'm going to select that folder, call it Lucky Imaging, and we'll start. Now the first thing we want to do is to load in the video we created from PIP, and I can just drag and drop that in, and there it is. Now I'll need to create add a video track, and we can just add the video that's up here in this screen. It'll just tack it onto the end of whatever happens to be here. There was nothing here before, so it just tacks it in here. And I'm going to expand this out a bit just to make things easier to look at. And so now this is the whole video, but because we're going to make this a little more cinematic, if you will, it's a little more than just a diagnostic video. If all you want is a diagnostic video, then the PIP video or loading those images into Pix Insight's Blink utility are just fine to do that. But we're going a next step here to make a nicer video. And a couple of things I want to do is to create an introduction or an initial frame and a final frame so that things don't jump around too much. When you're taking videos at 1 minute intervals, there tends to be a lot of quick jumps from one position to the next. So for example, it'll jump, and then toward the end it'll jump again, or it'll just finish in the park position, and then the video will abruptly end. So for example, if we were looking at the end of the imaging session, it's sitting there and it's over. Okay, so I want to create kind of a more lengthy extension for the beginning and the end of the video, just so we have a smoother transition to exit the video. So the first thing I want to do, for example, is find the first frame where it's parked, and I'm just hitting the right arrow key, scrolling through the images here. There it is. Okay, so that is when the scope is first parked and before the screen is too overexposed by the rising sun. So I'm going to take that and go over to File, Export Frame. I'm going to export this frame as a PNG file, just a graphics file, and we'll call that End. And I'm going to also take this opportunity to slice off the rest of this video. So I'm going to use this cut and then highlight that piece of the track and take the scissors and cut that off. And we'll go back to the beginning of the video and do the same thing and create another image when it's in the parked position just before we start all the motion. And once again, I will go over to the file and pull out that particular frame as another just image file. Alright, now I'm going to go in and load the start file that I just created there and the end file. First thing I'm going to do is load this PNG of the parked position when we start. So now that's just an image. I'm going to add that to this track here, but it's going to append it at the end. Alright, so I'm going to take that and do this copy. So I'm copying that piece of the track, and I'm going to come back and set my pointer here. Again, highlight this video, and now do the paste. And now we have a 4-second long lead in. Now, if I wanted to make this longer introduction, I could make a longer introduction by simply dragging the edge of this picture, and it will be as long as we want it to be. 4 seconds is about right. And since I'm happy with that, I'm going to go ahead and delete this over here. But I'm going to load in now the end, when we're parked at the end of the imaging session, in here, and highlight the video track, and we can go ahead and just add that on. And so now we have another 4 seconds where we just get to the end of the parked scope, and it just hangs out there for 4 seconds and we don't notice any movement. Okay, so that's okay. That's the first thing we want to do. I'll go ahead and save changes as far as that is concerned at this stage. But I want to do a little more than that. I want to add some annotation. So let's highlight this area, and let's bring in what's called a filter, and we'll add a text filter. And the one that I want to use is just nothing fancy here. I just want to use a simple text filter. So there's simple text, and I'm going to highlight it, so I'm going to highlight that section, and there's the text that it automatically put in. Obviously, we're not going to be doing that, so I'm going to say imaging session 207-01. And I need to make some other changes. For example, I can pick a different font color if I want to do that. I can outline the text in some color if I want to do that. And of course I want to shrink it down quite a bit, so I'm going to use this tool to tell it to allow me to select a font. So something like that is probably going to be okay, I think. Now we just have a simple introductory piece of text just to tell us what it is that we're looking at. Now if I want to add text to the rest of it, and I don't want to enter in a whole bunch of other parameters, if I had entered some of these other things in addition to what I did here, what I can do is just come up to this little copy button and paste it into here. And now if I come over and highlight this area, you can see we have imaging session, but we want to edit this a little bit. So for example, the first thing that's going to start happening is the telescope is tracking at this stage. And I'm going to put in a cut here and highlight this section. We'll just say, we'll change the text to say tracking. And so now it says tracking. We're going to get to the end of that. And then now it's focused on M13, and I'm doing some focusing with, as the camera is cooling down, I'm doing some focusing, preparing to move over to SH286 for the target. And that happens about right there. So I'm going to put in another cut and highlight this section of the video. Again, I'm going to change this to focus on M13. And now you can see it says focus on M13. Now we'll come over and now we're imaging on SH286. SH286 just passes the tip of the chimney here, so I can pick it up about right here and then image it for as long as I can, or as long as I want to after this. So I'm going to come in here. We're going to find out where this thing finally takes its jump over to M16, and I'm just pressing the right arrow, scrolling through the video until finally I'll see it jump. There it goes to M16. Okay, I'm going to put a cut in here, and we'll highlight that section of the video and say something intelligent like imaging SH286. Most people aren't going to know what SH286 looks like, so wouldn't it be cool if we had a little inset of the picture of SH286 sitting up here, and we would know what it is we're taking a picture of, because you certainly aren't going to see SH286 on the screen here. So the way we can do that is by adding another video track. And now I'm going to go get that picture I made of SH286 after my first day of imaging, and we'll just drag and drop that into here. Here's SH286, and I think I can just drop it into this line here. And now we can play with this a little bit and figure out where we want to put it. So if we're here, there's the imaging SH286. So what we want to do is to shift this so that this picture applies all the way from one end to the other. And I'm going to scroll back out a tad here so that we can see it, and I'm going to line this up so that we're right there at the start of imaging SH286, and I'm going to stretch that out to here while we're imaging SH286, and then scroll back in, zoom back in, so we can do some fine tuning of this if we need to. That looks fine there. And over here, well, we're going to have to make an adjustment to about right there, and I'll stretch it out a little bit. Okay, so now when we're in this zone, we're seeing the full image, full screen here, and behind it there's the video. So we want to now highlight the picture, and I'm going to come over here and apply a filter to the picture that we see here. And in particular, I'm going to find the size. I'm going to shrink this down. I can grab a tab here and just shrink it down so that it's not taking up too much space. Something like that. It says 30.8%. Okay, fine. I'm just going to say 30%. That shows us what we're imaging here. Let's bring in another picture, this time of M16. We'll put that right in there. And I'm going to highlight the picture video track that we have here, and I'm just going to append that on. So let's go ahead and take the opportunity to add the filter and shrink this down. And now we know this is 30%, and I can just move that off, grab the center of the image and move that off to the top of video here. What we want to do now is to find out how long this picture needs to apply, because we're going to do a meridian flip. There it goes. Alright, so we're right here. I'm going to cut the video there, and then I'm going to bring the picture and bring it back so that it lines up with that cut that I just made. And I'm going to change this to say M16 past meridian with an exclamation mark. So I'm going to go ahead and add yet another picture into this image here. And for that, because I need another superimposed image, I'm going to need yet another video track. So I'm going to add another video track. And in here, I'm going to bring in a little graphic of what it looks like when you're past the meridian. So there's our image, and I'm going to bring that in Now I just need to move it into place, and we'll come in with it about right here. So now we're lined up in terms of our timeline. And what we can do is, again, I'll highlight this image and bring in the size, position, rotate filter. I'm going to just shrink this down and position it over here. And it does the actual meridian flip, and now we're imaging on the right side of the meridian with M16. So now we can come in and say imaging M16. And now we need to figure out how far that goes, because at the end of imaging M16 it sets and there's still some good imaging time left. So I go back up to SH286 just to capture a few more images. So let's just see when that is, and that's where we'll put another cut, change the corresponding text here to say imaging SH286. But we want to also put in our picture of the M16 nebula. We also want to put that in over here as well. So I'm going to copy that. It will just attach it here, right there. But I also want to go in and change this format. First of all, I want to pull it back over to the other side of the sky. The second thing is we've had a meridian flip, so I'm going to go ahead and rotate this 180 degrees. And I'm going to shift it to the other side of the screen where the sky is and get it off of where the house is. And now we just need to drag that out while we're imaging M16, and this is where we make the transition over to SH286. And I'm going to go bring in the SH286 picture again, just drag and drop it onto the video track. And I'm going to shift that so that it lines up. And once again, we're going to change the filter on this as well. Let's move the position here. So we'll have to scale this again. And I'm going to take this tab and move it up here to the top of the video so it's out of the way. We can extend out until it gets to that point. Copy the filter I have for this particular one, paste it into here, and edit it. What we can also do is add in a little bit of music to this, and for that I'm going to add an audio track. And for this, I'm just going to come in and take this piece of audio I pulled off the web and just drag and drop it into here, and we'll have to shift it over so that it comes to the start of the video. And so now we have an audio track, and because it's going to be a little loud, I'm going to go ahead and highlight the audio track and put a filter on this and make it down the sound level a bit on that, and I can use the gain and volume, and I'm going to make that -8 dB. Let's fade out the music, and we'll make that a 1 second fade out, and we'll also come up to the video and do a fade out, and I'm going to fade that out over a period of 2 seconds. And I might go ahead and fade in the audio on this side. So let's fade in the audio again over a 1 second period. That's the default. And so now we have a complete video of our imaging session documenting a huge mistake I made, but fortunately didn't cost me anything in the end. I just learned a valuable lesson without having to shell out money to fix it. So now at this stage we can export the video. I'm going to go over here, I'm going to pick YouTube as I usually do, export the video, and just save the file, and you'll see it appear up over here, and you'll get kind of a percentage complete. Well, I'm going to post this up to YouTube along with the video that you're obviously watching, and I'll have the link to this standalone video of our imaging session so you can take a look at it. Okay, let's go summarize what we've seen here. The fundamental problem I made was making a quick change on the fly to my imaging sequence, and I thought that the second target, which was M16, was going to be far enough beyond the meridian so that when I did a slew to the target, it would automatically incorporate the meridian flip. And in fact, that did not happen, and the telescope went about 20 degrees past the meridian with the camera down, so that's very dangerous. I use Green Swamp Server, GSS, which I've been pretty happy with to control my Skywatcher EQ6R. It has motion limits, but they're just warnings. They don't actually stop them out. That's kind of frustrating. I would like for them, if possible, to incorporate actual hard stops, and I think EQ Mod has this, so I think that's one advantage that EQ Mod has that GSS does not currently have. I'm not sure which piece of software, frankly, initiated the meridian flip. Whichever piece of software it is that did that, I owe them a beer, because I'm not sure I would have caught this error if I were not looking at the cloud cam and catching that weird change to the target and then a meridian flip immediately after it, which should not have occurred. Miraculously, I don't even know how this happened. Nina took the unscheduled meridian flip totally in stride. I didn't miss an image. It kept imaging all the way past the meridian, and then there was the automatic meridian flip, whoever did it, and it was back onto target, back in focus, and just followed on. And so I didn't lose any images whatsoever. On a separate note, we've been through, just for the heck of it, I took this opportunity to introduce you to ShotCut for video editing. Just a note to myself, hey, be careful with your image session planning. Good grief, you could have caused a lot of damage out there. All right, guys. Well, clear skies. I'll do some more imaging. But yeah, let's be careful out there. I'll see you guys later.